Hey, what's happening? Tim Warner here, just enjoying some coffee. And today I want to talk about the employee as resource. Let me start by saying that if I'm talking to a project manager, it's okay for them to use resource as far as I'm concerned. It's a totally different thing when a manager or a business person uses resource as a synonym for disposable human being. And I've found in my experience working as an IT professional, I know the difference. And frankly, I'm sure you do as well. Let me tell a little story. I'm a huge fan of classic video gaming. And in the late 70s, 4 programmers, they're game designer programmers for Atari, decided that, first of all, they didn't feel appreciated by the company because Atari at that time refused to give the author of the game any credit at all. All Atari games, and then we're talking about the VCS, the Atari 2600. And I've got one just out of camera range here that I enjoy every day. Thank you very much. But anyway, these 4 guys were like, our games are generating like 40% of Atari's revenue. We're not seeing any of that money in a royalty. We're not given credit. And so one of the guys asked the CEO of Atari, who was very much out of touch, for help. What do you think? And this dude told him, look, you're no more important to Atari than the person who's packaging the game cartridges on the assembly line. The customer's not going to get the game if they don't pack the game, and they're not going to get the game if you don't make it. You're no more important than them. And these 4 guys copped a resentment, and they formed Activision, which was the first third-party video game publisher, and they made an enormous amount of money, and they made tremendous games. And you might notice if you look at those old Activision Atari 2600 games, they always had a photo and name and bio of the author, the game designer. And those game designers earned royalties on those games, as I think they should. So this is to illustrate what can happen if you're viewing people as disposable resources. They're going to go somewhere where they're appreciated, and they might outsell you and put you out of business, right? I once worked many years ago for a training organization here in Nashville. I'm not going to mention their name, although I'm tempted to, whose manager, CEO, whatever his job title was very much that the trainers in particular were disposable, dispendable resources who could be replaced as easily as a roll of toilet paper in the bathroom. And they made no bones about that attitude. By contrast, this guy put all of his love in the sales staff. And I remember my trainer colleagues and I would sit in the break room just shooting the bull, and we could hear laughing and cutting up, and the salespeople would be clustered around the manager or CEO. Again, I don't remember what the job title was. And he would be giving them trivia questions and throwing $20 bills up. These salespeople were literally scrambling on the ground for $20 bills. It was just really grotesque, honestly. And I felt how unvalued I was at that organization. It was a huge lesson to me in many, many ways. So I would submit that the lesson from this notion of the employee as a resource, is for you to know your value. Know your value as a working IT professional. Ask around, do research, make sure you're being compensated fairly for your job role and where you are in the world. Number 2, know your value as a human being. You don't have to stay somewhere where you're not appreciated. I had mentioned in my previous video, I believe, the one on perfectionism, that acquisitions sometimes result in this disposable resources idea because the company and its employees may have a wonderful environment of mutual respect. But then when the company gets acquired, the parent company has no context, no interest in those relationships. And in that case, you really do start to feel like a number in a database, a line item on a spreadsheet that can easily be deleted. And that's certainly true. Sometimes it can't be helped. I know more than twice I've worked for companies that were acquired and had to deal with that back and forth of the parent company really not giving a crap, and the company that was acquired giving a crap but having their hands tied because they're now owned. So, yeah, I mean, I understand and want to recognize my privilege here, that I'm grateful I live in an area of the world where I'm free to move to any job I want, wherever I want, and I'm grateful to have a valuable skill set that's in demand, specifically IT and education. So I'm pretty portable as far as work goes, and that means the world to me. But again, to tie back to my previous lesson on everybody is expendable, everybody in business is expendable, I not only need to always evaluate my worth, but also at the same time recognize that I could be laid off just like that for any reason, and that I am expendable and I'm not too smart or too talented for any business to decide to jettison me for any reason. There was a corollary point to that that's slipping out of my head. I want to capture it. Hang on just a second. Let me cogitate on that for a moment. Yeah, okay, I got it. Yes. And that is, I learned this particular lesson, and this is what I'll wrap up with. I learned this lesson during my time at Microsoft. Microsoft is a very metrics-based organization. And when you do your review with your manager or your leader, you need to quantify your value to the company. Now, I'm going to give Microsoft huge bucket loads of credit here, because although Microsoft is a quantitative company, they're looking for metrics and numbers, there's also the human aspect, at least down at the work group level where you're working with people directly. Way up in the ivory tower, that's a much more algorithmic and sociopathic environment, just by its nature. But the reviews at Microsoft were always human. I felt like I was a valuable human being and colleague. But that still is a challenge that I struggle with to this day in terms of translating my benefit or value to my employer in dollars and cents terms. It's really important to do that kind of analysis. My current manager and friend, Greg Shields, taught me that as well. It's another story for another time, but he used quantitative analysis to help bring me back to Pluralsight when I was ready to leave Microsoft. How do you determine your dollar value to your company? Well, it depends on what you do. For me, it's actually not too difficult, because what I can do is run reports on the courses that I've published at Pluralsight and run reports on viewership and how much revenue they've generated, and then forecast if I were a contract author and earning royalties in addition. So I can create pretty accurate visualizations of how much I would have cost the company as a contract author versus a full-time author. And then even as a full-time author, I can demonstrate that, yeah, it costs you as a company this much to pay for my benefits and my overhead and that kind of stuff. But I deliver this much value on top in my work and that kind of stuff. So if you don't mind doing that kind of quantitative analysis, that'd make it a lot easier for you to prove and demonstrate your value as a working IT professional to your organization. Now, will that make a difference if it comes down to downsizing, acquisition, and layoff? Maybe, maybe not. But it comes down from a practicality standpoint as, would I rather be equipped with this data about myself, this evidence to back up my value, or not? It's your choice. It's still a challenge for me because honestly, I'm much more of a qualitative person than quantitative. The numbers, dollars and cents numbers, make me kind of nervous and anxious, so I don't like to mix it into that. I'm much more, tell me how you feel about my courses. Give me an elevator pitch, what you see, what people like, what they don't like. That's the craftsman or the craftsperson in me speaking. I want to know these things so I can know what I should keep doing and enhance as a teacher, and what I should consider jettisoning because it's not constructive in the delivery, you see? All right. So that is the lesson of the day. The employee is the resource. And yes, you think about human resources or HR being the traditional name of a personnel department. At Pluralsight, I don't know if they still call it this, but they historically have called the HR department People Ops. And at Microsoft, it's called People at Microsoft. So I love, it's actually a good acid test of a corporate culture. Do they call their human resources department human resources, or do they call it people? I just thought of that. That's actually a pretty nice, quick acid test to look at corporate culture. I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.